Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video, I actually saw my clan just defeated the Hydra. I'm blocking it entirely. I ruined this whole bit. Our clan has just defeated Hydra on Nightmare difficulty. Great. I want to do an update, a guide on how to build a quick battle team for Hydra. Now that we have quick battles, and you two will be able to do 4 billion damage. Okay, I'm not going to promise you can do 4 billion damage Nightmare Hydra, but we will build a core successful Hydra team. I mean, you can sort of consider this to be just your sort of 2025, I suppose, quick guide on how to do the Hydra, what debuffs, what buffs to bring, sorts of champions, that sort of thing. So let's dive in. Obviously, quick battles, I still need to run my key this week, but you need to do the maximum key for a difficulty with one single key, and then you can do 5 quick battles per week. You can obviously choose to rerun them if you want. You can discard the result, but you only have 5 attempts. But yeah, I imagine it's what lots of people are going to do. I do have a full article on this up on hellhades.com that I wrote, so this will be your quick reference point. I'll link it in the description if you want to see. But let's dive in. So the first thing I'd be doing against the Hydra would be considering the debuffs to bring. Debuffs are your best friend against this boss, and I've picked out my top 10, and let's go, right? So there are 4 debuffs which I would consider to be... I should also say at this point that, you know, there are going to be some teams which will have some exceptions to this, but I think in general for 99, probably 99.999% of you watching this, building your quick battle teams, the sort of necessary, great, and optional things that I've set out should be a fairly good guide. So, block buffs, provoke, decrease speed, and decrease defense. So let's take a look. In fact, let's kick out everyone from this team, and then I'll show you my team after. And I mean, it's a crazy team, but you'll get the gist of it. Again, using the filter is probably the easiest way to do it. I'd say I've put block buffs as the #1 thing to bring. It's actually a little bit rare, and what you want is a champion like Ugo is a phenomenal example. Someone who's going to bring a consistent source of block buffs. Ugo has a 50% chance of AoE block buffs on a 3-turn when booked, but that books up to 75. An extra 5% for each enemy alive is an extra 20% for enemies in Hydra. That's 95%. You get it as Sniper Mastery, 100%. You basically want AoE block buffs. Why do you want this? Well, for multiple reasons. Number 1, the Head of Wrath is going to get increased attack. He'll get buff himself with reflect damage, block debuffs. It's very bad if that happens. Poison Cloud will come out and block all of your moves, which really sucks. The Head of Mischief will try to steal buffs and to spread them around his team. Head of Suffering will put up reflect damage and also ally protection on the other heads. All of these buffs that the Hydra can give themselves or get for themselves are really bad. And in my opinion, it's the #1 thing to do is to prevent that from happening. So a reliable block buffs champion is the #1 most important thing. That should be the first thing for your nice quick battle full auto team. That's the first thing to put in there. Your best possible block buffs champion. Again, some examples, quick examples. Let's cover some quick. Let's actually move me to this side. Probably makes more sense for this, doesn't it? And if I include my Master Vault, let's look at epics just to give you some quick epic examples. Ugo, fantastic for this. Umbral Enchantress, another really good example. She has block buffs for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. She's void as well, so she won't have affinity issues. As you can see, it's pretty slim pickings. After that, there's not really many good options. I think there is Ostrok's Bone Glaive or Bone Glove or Bone something. I don't have him, but he's the lizardy looking fella from the Undead who's a void epic. He's very good as well. And there's multiple good legendary. Actually, it's worth mentioning a legendary, probably most of you have. Sun Wukong. Fantastic for this. AoE block buffs on a 3-turn. He also steals all buffs before attacking. We'll talk about that in a bit. Provoke. Provoke is essential for one simple reason. Only one head is vulnerable to provoke, and it's the Head of Decay. Why is that important? Well, because he cleanses off all the debuffs on the other Hydra heads and also turn meter boosts them. He also gives a big shield, a life barrier, to which also, by the way, does not count technically as a shield, but I guess we incorrectly call it a shield, but it is a life barrier, so you can't remove it with like remove shield abilities, for instance. But life barrier, you'll put that up on the lowest HP Hydra head, which can be a nightmare. If that head has devoured one of your champions, it becomes almost impossible to get them free. So it's really good to try to provoke him. Now, there's a couple of tricks to this, and also you would do a similar thing with your block buff champion. You want them to be pretty fast. I would recommend, I think for Nightmare Hydra, you could go really quite reasonably as high as 300 speed. For the lower difficulties, you can go a good bit lower, so maybe like 280 here, 260. I'd even be aiming for like 240 speed on my debuff champions for normal Hydra if possible. Hydra, by the way, in case you don't know, unlocks far too early. We've discussed this on my free-to-play account. I've been able to get like the bottom chest even on the account that's just unlocked Hydra, but it's a nightmare. No pun intended here. But Hydra is way too difficult for when it unlocks. It does take time because you need so many things. This article being a great example of that. Anyway, you want to provoke, stop the Head of Decay cleansing, which is very important to control the fight. Very, very important that you control the fight. And yeah, what you would want, ideally, is someone with a 3-turn cooldown provoke, or someone that can do it very consistently. So basically as consistently as that, and in combination with the other necessary buffs and debuffs, increase speed and decrease speed. With high enough speed, you should be able to keep him provoked permanently. That's the goal. If you can't keep him provoked permanently, it's still good enough to delay him substantially with his cleansing. And some rotations, Head of Decay actually starts with Head of Blight, and what will happen is that Head of Decay goes first, will cleanse off your block buffs, and then Head of Blight will come in straight after and put up a poison cloud. And suddenly you're sat there going, I cannot do any damage. I've got the entire Hydra is covered with 2 turns of poison cloud. Everything's weak hitting. I can't do anything. So it's really important to have a provoke. Difficult to get it again from epics. This is sort of a problem. We talked about this the other day. I would say very good choice is Seeker. Seeker, he doesn't have, super reliable in the sense that it's not 100% chance, but he's got a double hitter. Each hit has a 50% chance. So he basically has a 75% chance to provoke, and he does this A1 effectively every single turn. So he's really, really good. Skiramis is another really good one. He has an AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown. So he's fantastic. Again, just build him with enough speed and obviously enough accuracy to land the debuff, and you're away. So I would definitely be bringing in a provoker. The reason is simply to keep the rest of your debuffs on. If you don't have a provoker, these just get removed, and then there's almost no point in having them. Decrease speed and decrease defense, very straightforward. Decrease defense is a key buff almost everywhere. So you want someone to decrease. Hydra has some of the highest defense in the game. It will just up your damage massively. So you need it really to do damage, and decrease speed will slow down the Hydra turns. This is basically essential to keep other debuffs on as much as possible, to give you time for your provoker to cycle back, to give you time to heal up, to survive everything else. So decrease speed, AoE, is basically essential. But we will build some teams when we go through this. Some great options. I think these are really good. Hex. You can actually get the Hex from the Cursed set. Hex will let you do more damage, right? It duplicates 2% of all AoE damage and 10% of all single target. That works really well against the Hydra, where there's 4 heads, and you can do massive single target damage to a head that's decapitated. They take triple damage, and then duplicate 10% of all of that to the other heads that are alive. It's very, very helpful. And it lets you target Mischief directly. Otherwise, he redirects, and that's a huge problem, especially for quick battles, that you won't be able to break people free from Mischief unless you got huge AoE damage. Hex makes it easy. Weaken, you do 25% more damage. Simple, really strong. And decrease attack. For some of you, this may be necessary to take less damage. It really depends how tanky your team is. I put it up as a great debuff. You might not need it, but you also might. This is particularly important against the Head of Wrath. So I would encourage you to watch the affinity of the Head of Wrath. This changes every rotation. And to make sure your decreased attack champion is appropriate for Head of Wrath. It doesn't really matter too much on the other heads. Head of Wrath is the big one, for sure. So there you go. Optional, HP burn. This gives you easy damage, right? So HP burn debuffs. Let's take a look at an example of a great HP burn champion. From the epics, I mean, Geomancer is a great example. I say Mordecai or Skrank pumping out AoE burns is great as well. The great thing about burn is just based off their max HP. So if you're an earlier player, burn is really strong because you don't have great gear, you don't have great champions, your damage isn't going to be that high. Your burn does as much damage as my burn. Whatever, my account is 4 or 5 years old now, and I've got crazy gear. So I'm at the point where, for me, I actually don't care about burns at all, really. It just doesn't do much damage compared to just hitting, like I use Ninja, who's a classic, amazing burner. But I don't use Ninja at all for his burns. I really don't care. He's not there for that. The burns do almost nothing from Ninja. Ninja, for me, is doing lots of damage because my Ninja has 8.4k attack and 350 crit damage. So, yeah. We don't really care about his burns at that point. But burns is a very easy way, and it also lets you hit through Poison Cloud. You get burns on. Even if Poison Cloud goes up, you can still do normal hits to targets under Poison Cloud if they are burned, which makes it very useful. And it makes champions like Geomancer or Mordecai, who place burn not on an attack, but they just place it with an ability that's not an attack, that can go through the Poison Cloud and let you basically bypass it, which is very good. Decrease accuracy, I think, is a nice optional one, especially if you've got increased resist on your team or some high resist people. This will help you resist poisons. It will help you resist the provokes. It will help you resist Head of Mischief, stealing your buffs or your turn meter. It helps you resist a lot of stuff that Hydra does, so this is very valuable. And Leech will also help you stay alive, especially with for champions with War Master or Giant Slayer. So those are that's not all the debuffs. You can bring others there. I think the 10 top ones. Definitely make sure you've got the 4 necessary ones, and then work in the others if you've got space. But before you probably work in those more optional ones, let's look at the best buffs, because you need to make sure you've got some of these in there. So obviously enough, I think increased speed, in my opinion, is the one necessary buff, and we've got a big chunk of great ones, and you sort of you don't need all of them, but you want at least some. Increased speed, though, I think is fairly non-negotiable. Really high priority to get that in. Take more turns. And again, you will be more consistent with maintaining provoke, decrease defense. You'll be more consistent with healing up and surviving, getting revives if you need them, simply doing damage. Increase speed on you, decrease speed on the boss. Win-win. It's a night and day difference how much more damage and many more turns you will take. For great buffs, we've got basically a ton of defensive stuff for the most part, and then increased attack. Perfect Veil. This, I'm not going to put it as necessary because there are other ways to deal with the true fear. This may be necessary for some of you and some of your teams, but Perfect Veil will prevent the Head of Torment placing True Fear, and especially because these are quick battles, it's full auto. You're going to be getting True Feared all the time. You will waste your skills. If you're going to play on manual, this is not as important, but I think that for quick battles, yeah, having a way to deal with Head of Torment's True Fears is essential. Other ways to deal with it, you could use someone who's cleansing, like a Doom Priest, going to cleanse every single turn. You can use the Harmonic Impulse Blessing. I think I actually have that on one of my Krisk. Yeah, one of my Krisks has this blessing. Funny, is actually I've got them the wrong gear. That this blessing should be on this Krisk, and this blessing should be on this Krisk. But hey, mistakes were made. Free gear change. I'll fix it soon. Yeah, block debuffs will really reduce the damage that you help you stay alive massively because it will stop poisons. This will really reduce the damage that the Head of Blight can do. It will stop the heal reduction from Head of Decay. And Head of Decay, because you're provoking him all the time, should be spamming heal reduction attack every single turn. And yeah, this will also protect you from the provokes and stuff like that the other heads will throw out too. So block debuffs is really great. You don't need it, but it's really nice. Increase attack is obviously, 60% more damage from your attack-based damage dealers. It's quite a bit. Then you've got options. Shield, strengthen, increase defense. I'd also, put sort of ally protection. Maybe that could be up here as well. You don't need all of these. It's overkill. But having some of these will help you to stay alive. And it depends. If you're not able to stay alive and you've brought increased speed and decreased speed and provoke and block buffs, like you've brought the other essential stuff, and you're still not staying alive, then say, okay, maybe I do need to bring in a good shield champion or a strengthen champion or increased defense, maybe ally protection. I think that's a little harder to make work. I put it as optional, but that's when you start to consider it. Let's say Mithrala Lifebane is a perfect example. Mithrala, absolutely insane for this. Let's remove the debuff thingy. But Mithrala will come in, and if we take these out, obviously you get her from Hydra, but she brings you increased defense and increase attack indeed, and she brings you strengthen and shield. You'll know from using her how much she can help you stay alive, right? Increased accuracy, I think, is a nice optional thing as well, right? To hit accuracy requirements, quite good. But definitely prioritize increased speed. then definitely consider Perfect Veil if you're struggling against Torment. Then look at stuff that will help you stay alive. Increased defense will up the damage from your defense-based damage. Similar to increased attack for attack-based, you can bring those in for more damage once you're sort of comfortable, and they're well worth bringing in if you're able to. But yeah, sort of prioritize staying alive. There are effects as well. I think the game is distinguishing more these days between buffs, debuffs, and effects. There's a lot more nomenclature, like text in the game referencing effects nowadays. These are the most important ones. I think a revive is effectively necessary for most people for quick battles. If somebody dies, let's say, oh, block buffs failed to land and reflect damage went up. Uh-oh, my damage dealer died. That's your quick battle run, basically ruined. Revive will keep your run going and protects you from bad RNG, bad randomness. So revive is really, I'd actually consider it necessary. I'd be looking to bring that in every single team. Ally attack does a huge amount of damage. That's great to bring. It's not necessary, but it's great. Increase buff duration. Again, this is great. This will, most buffs in this game, good buffs on champions will be like, whatever, 2 turns increase speed, but they've got a 3-turn cooldown. Even bringing one champion with extending buffs can make that speed a 3-turn. And now you've got 3 turns of increased speed with a 3-turn cooldown. It's up the whole time. It's actually a really, really big increase to the effectiveness of your buffs, and you're just keeping you safe with defensive buffs, keeping you covered. So it's a really, really nice one to bring in. It's fantastic in Hydra. And then we've got optional stuff. Cleansing, so remove debuffs. This is great to stop poisons, the heal reductions, the provokes and all of that, to stop that from happening. It's really useful. Reducing skill cooldowns. This is relatively rare. In fact, you can check the effects in-game as well. If we come to the filter, we go to other effects. Here they call it other. We're looking mostly at positive ones, but, decreasing skill cooldown is rare, but some of the most powerful champions are able to do this. Like, I don't know, let's say Ancora was a previous fusion. On her A1, she can be reducing a skill cooldown by 2 turns. So it just helps you use your skills more often, which is simple and straightforward. So that's a nice optional one to bring in. Healing, simple enough to heal up is good. Increasing turn meter, brilliant as well. Removing buffs, this is actually a pretty decent option. If you're struggling with block buffs, if you can't, keep that up the whole time, having a champion who can remove buffs, so Sun Wukong does both, is really nice, because that can potentially save you from those reflect damage buffs. Or if the Head of Mischief is stealing all of your stuff, being able to remove them is nice. I think it's very much optional, but it's nice. Increasing debuff duration, not as important as increasing buffs, because, again, if you're building enough speed on your champs, and you've got increased speed and decreased speed, and they're consistent, you should be able to get back sheer moves quickly enough to keep the debuffs up the whole time. But this can still be helpful to just make it a bit more consistent. But buffs is much more important to extend than debuffs. And then finally, you can spread debuffs as well. I think that's useful. A couple of other options, and we'll look at some team builds. Auras, I think speed is the best. Accuracy is really good to hit requirements. Attack is good for more damage if you're using an attack-based damage dealer. HP is fine to survive. Resistance can actually be really good too if you're trying to build a resistance team with increased resist or decreased accuracy, whatever. And then something we call a mischief tank. Mischief tank, basically the Head of Mischief always tries to steal buffs and turn meter from whoever has the most buffs. So you can take a champion who puts out a lot of buffs. Krisk is a classic example. Let's go back to Skiramis. He's a really good example. He's like epic Krisk, basically, but Skiramis comes in, counterattack, and continuous heal on himself. That's 2 buffs that he has extra. If he is, now he's a little bit awkward because he also provokes, so he does need to be quite fast. This is where a buff extender might be quite good. Yeah, because he's got extra buffs, he will get targeted by Head of Mischief. If you then build lots and lots and lots of resistance on this guy, he can then resist the Head of Mischief, and suddenly Head of Mischief can't steal his buffs, can't steal his turn meter, and becomes much, much less of a threat. So that's the idea of a mischief tank. Often they will be slow. That makes it easy for them to have the most buffs. If they're fast, they'll outrun them sometimes. Champions who put buffs on themselves are very good for this, and you need to build lots of resistance. It's a stat-intensive role. I think you're not going to be able to do this if you're brand new, but when you get a bit further into the game, it can be very valuable. It's not necessary, but it's very valuable. So let me show you my endgame team, and then let's build a budget team. So my endgame team, this is what I've been using. It is obviously insanely stacked. It's crazy. I've done a whole video on it. But let's see, just for the sake of it, to give you a concept, which of the necessary buffs and debuffs do we have? So for our necessary debuffs, do I have block buffs, provoke, decrease speed, and decrease defense? Let's take a look. So block buffs. I've got block buffs from Lazarius. 2-turn duration on a 3-turn cooldown. Job done. Provoke. Krisk. He's got a provoke on a 3-turn cooldown. Yes. Job done. Decrease speed. Krisk also has that on his A1. And we do, because it's A1, by the way, it's not super reliable. But because we've got that full team ally attack from Lady Mikage, that helps him to be a bit more consistent. So we've got decreased speed. It could be a little bit better, but we've got it. And do we have decreased defense? Krisk's passive gives us that. And then again, with Mikage's ally attacks, Ninja actually brings decreased defense on his A1. So there you go. We've got the necessary debuffs, block buffs, provoke, decrease speed, decrease defense. Done. What about Hex, Weaken, decrease attack? We've got Hex and Weaken from Mad Hatter. We've got decrease attack from Krisk. So yes, we've got all of those. HP burn, decrease accuracy, and leech. We've got HP burn from Ninja. We don't have decrease accuracy, and we don't have leech. We don't need them for this team. For our buffs, do we have increased speed? Yes, we do. Krisk brings increased speed for everyone. Krisk, who knew? He brings a lot of buffs and debuffs. Perfect Veil, block debuffs, increase attack, shield strengthen, increase defense, and these optional ones as well. Increase accuracy, ally protection, and continuous heal. What do we have? Perfect Veil, this is actually the weakness of this team. This team is not actually that good against Head of Torment. Ninja puts Perfect Veil on himself, so he has it. And Lazarius puts Perfect Veil on himself, so he has it. So we got 2 champs with it. The others are kind of vulnerable, which is why this Krisk is supposed to have Harmonic Impulse, or Harmonious Impulse, whatever it's called. And I'm going to put it on Mad Hatter as well. I'm basically going to give them both the blessings to deal with the True Fear, which is probably not ideal, but hey, it works and it's a strong team. So this is definitely a weakness of this team. Block debuffs, yes, we've got that from Lazarius. He brings it. Again, he brings a crazy amount of buffs and debuffs. Increase attack, Lazarius. Strengthen, Lazarius. Shield, we don't have any shields. Well, Krisk gives you some at the start of the fight. We don't have any other shields, but we don't actually need it because we got the strengthen. Increase defense and increase accuracy. We've got both of those from Marius. And we don't have continuous heals, but we've got ally protection from Krisk. So in terms of staying alive, we've got a consistent decrease attack from Krisk. We've got a consistent strengthen from Lazarius. We've got block debuffs from Lazarius and ally protection from Krisk alongside increased defense from Marius. And it's more than enough to stay alive. We don't need everything, but we need at least some. Our best effects, revive. Yes, we've got that from Lazarius. We've got ally attack from Mikage and the Mad Hatter. That's very strong. Increased buff duration. Actually, we've got tons. Krisk, Mikage and Mad Hatter can all increase buff duration, so we've got that up the wazoo. For a cleanse, we don't have a full cleanse, though Mikage and Mad Hatter can both reduce the... Does he reduce debuff duration? I think he does. Yeah, he does. We've got 2 champs that can reduce debuff duration a little bit, so we sort of have removing debuffs. We can reduce the duration. I don't have any reduced skill cooldown. Mad Hatter is healing us. We've got increased turn meter from also Mad Hatter and Lazarius. Removing buffs, Lazarius can do that. And Mikage can reduce their duration. Increase debuff duration. Actually, Mikage does it. And debuff spread, Mad Hatter does it. So we've kind of got all that covered. We've got a speed aura, and Krisk is our mischief tank. So yeah, this is obviously a very strong team because we've got 2 mythicals, extremely strong mythicals, and 4 extremely strong legendaries, all for this game mode. We've covered a ton of this stuff. We've covered basically everything that's necessary, and we've covered probably most of the great buffs, debuffs, and effects as well. Sometimes even having a couple of sources of it on the team. So yeah, this is a very, very strong team. I think this team will have the potential to do like 1 billion damage on Nightmare, which is good. It's not as much as a Trunda team, which is an exceptional type of team, but it's good. Here's another similar sort of one to what I'm rocking with here. This is very similar to the team I've got, but they've got a Teox instead of Mad Hatter. And yeah, you sort of get the gist. Let's build a budget team because that team is ridiculous. I just want to give you the idea. So let's go in. And sort of the budget team, we'll try to mostly focus on epics and whatnot, with one exception. I'm going to bring in a champion I love. We're going to bring in Vizix as a real Hydra MVP. What does Vizix do? Vizix comes in, AoE decrease speed, ally protection for the team is a nice bonus, and then also provoke, AoE provoke on a 3-turn. So she is our decrease speed and our Provoke champion. I'm bringing her in to sort of cheat a little bit for the budget team. I mean, she's pretty budget, but you have to play the game for 9 months to get her. But it's actually very difficult to get good decrease speed and good Provoke champions from the epics. It's quite a contested spot. So this, bringing her in, just as an example legendary, she'll be the only legendary on this team, makes the run a heck of a lot easier. But you can, bring in legendary upgrades for any particular slot, and you will do well. Okay, so again, let's build a team. Let's do it from scratch. I've actually, here's me saying focus on the block buffs first, and I brought in the Provoke and decrease speed first. Well, we're going to bring in, again, another favorite champion of mine, which is Ugo. Ugo, absolutely insane. You can actually start the game with Ugo if you use the Hell Hades free-to-play 2025 starter code on to create your brand new account. But she has, we've already talked about her, decreased defense and block buffs altogether. Great. There we go. We now, between these two champions, we've got our 4 key debuffs locked in already. Decreased defense, block buffs from Ugo, Provoke and decrease speed from Physics. So we're good. How about increase speed? Ooh, this one is tricky to get in. This one is not easy to get in there. So what I'm going to do for this, we're going to be a bit cheeky. We're going to get, again, this is, I think, an epic champion that doesn't get enough love. We're going to get decrease attack and increase speed together. Anyone remember who this champion is? Just as an example champ, Golden Reaper. People don't like her too much, but she's pretty good for this, right? So she obviously has crazy base speed, which is really good, but she comes in with increased speed and even a turn meter boost, 20%. It's lovely. And then an AoE decrease attack. I actually think they should buff this. It'd probably be a 100% 3-turn cooldown. That would be really great for Golden Reaper. I would love to see that buff happen. Plarium, please make it happen. And Golden Reaper would then definitely deserve more love, but we'll bring her in, and there we go. Now we're actually feeling a bit survivable. Ugo, by the way, does bring in some healing and a little bit of cleansing. And she brings a leech on her A1, some of those more optional things. But now we've got a bit of healing, a bit of cleansing. We've got some ally protection. We've got decrease attack. We're provoking them. They can't buff up, right? We've got increased speed. We've got decreased speed, so we can stay on top of the turns. We already, right here with just 3 champions, have a very solid core to take this on. And now, obviously, you could do some upgrades. So, for example, let's put in like a classic one. Hades just pull this on his free-to-play. Nekmothar. Ooh, what happens when you bring in an amazing legendary? Increase speed with even more turn meter, decrease speed and leech, and decrease attack all on the one champion, with also a speed aura and even turn meter boosting for himself as well. Okay, Nekmothar is sort of combining a couple of different champions here into one. He sort of combines Physics and Golden Reaper almost into one single champion. And I would say even Nekmothar isn't even like the top of the top tier in Hydra anymore. I think he's even been slightly power crept at the very high end. But there you are. So we've got, again, multiple buffs covered. Increased speed is covered. Let's bring in Perfect Veil and Revive. We need Revive. That's the other necessary thing that we are missing. We want to get it in there. Perfect champ to bring in. Rector Drath. We want Rector Drath in there. Here we go. Rector Drath, she's bringing us big healing and Perfect Veil, and she brings us a Revive. She does bring decreased attack on her A1, but for a quick battle, it's not going to work. And she also, because it's going to target random stuff. It won't just target Head of Wrath. Yeah, she also brings even more healing with her passive. So it's great. Rector Drath, bam, lock it in. Fantastic. And now we've got effectively 4 support champions covering most of what we want to do. I like to bring in, I actually forgot to mention this in the article, I think 2 damage dealers is a good thing to aim for. You definitely want at least 1. You need to do some damage, but 2 damage dealers is pretty good. And like we've covered all the necessary stuff. Revive, yep. Lock it in. Increase speed, yep. And we've got Perfect Veil, cool. We don't have increased attack, which means our attack-based damage dealers on this team aren't going to be as strong unless they're bringing increased attack for themselves. And yeah, we've got the continuous heal. We've got healing, so we should have enough to stay alive. We've got the leech, and so on. Let's add a damage dealer. One of the best epic damage dealers in the entire game. Actually, probably the second best epic. Arguably the first best epic in the game. Geomancer, let's bring him in. He also brings us a HP aura. Ooh, even more survivability. But what's so good about Geomancer? He's bringing Burn. He's bringing Weaken. Those are 2 optional debuffs we don't have. But he's also reducing the damage that we take. And he's sending that back to that enemy and making them take damage. He also has AoE decrease accuracy. That's a nice debuff, and that synergizes very well with Rector Drath's passive, which is giving us more resistance. So we lower their accuracy, we gain more resistance. Suddenly, we might actually be resisting a lot of the debuffs that the Hydra's trying to throw at us. And he also can steal buffs from a target, which you could turn this off, actually, or you could leave it on. But there we go. We'll throw him in. And then I thought the final damage dealer I'd like to throw in would be Royal Guard as a great champion. Obviously, my champs are all empowered and whatnot, but Royal Guard comes in with enemy max HP damage. I'll put in a section on the post about damage. But yeah, increasing damage according to enemy max HP makes it very easy to do damage, and he brings some nice stuff as well for a damage dealer. He has some random decreased speed debuffs, which is great. If your decreased speed champion isn't that good or you don't have one, he can be the decreased speed champion. He has decreased defense on his A1. Again, he's not going to be your main decreased defense, but it's good. If you've got an ally attack champ in there, like a Farrakhan the Fat or something, yeah, great. It's going to really help, especially against decapitated heads and whatnot. And there you go. We've got ourselves a nice core Hydra team, which should do fairly well. Yeah, it's got the potential to do good damage even on auto. So I did actually break this team down in the article, by the way, if you want to, again, reference it and see some more info. So, for example, talking about what they have, and I suggested some sets. So, like Cursed Set on Vizix will give you AoE Hex very consistently. Relentless or Reflex Set on Ugo, Rector Drath, Golden Reaper, Geomancer. Basically, sets that are going to give them extra turns or reduce their cooldowns will give you a lot of benefit. I think like Reflex Set on Rector Drath in particular is great. Reducing the cooldown will keep Perfect Veil up much more often. Savage Set is a fairly typical damage dealer set when you're doing direct damage. So yeah, and I talked about what this team has, what this team is missing as well, like things that we don't have on this team that will make it a bit weaker, right? And also some potential upgrades like Krisk or Necmo, Marius the Gallant, we talked about him. Some classic examples that you might bring in to improve these, because these are mostly epics and whatnot. If we did not have Vizix, what would we do? Well, I think because for this team, we've got decreased speed from Royal Guard, we would be looking for a Provoke. I think this is where Seeker would probably be my ideal choice to fill in instead. Seeker will be providing us the Provoke. He'll be providing us with turn meter boosting and increased attack, which would mean an attack-based damage dealer would do well. Royal Guard will do a little more damage on his A1, his A3, and we'll use Royal Guard's A3 to be our more consistent sort. Not very consistent, but enough of decreased speed to hopefully do. It's not perfect, but if I had to use all epics with this sort of team, that's probably what I would do. Bring in the Seeker instead. So I've got the Provoke locked in, and the turn meter boosting will hopefully make up for decreased speed from Royal Guard not being quite as reliable. Yeah, that's sort of been my gist. So there you go, guys. Hopefully this has been some help. I think making a checklist for yourself is the easiest way to build an effective Hydra Quick Battle option. Try stuff out, see how it goes. And yeah, also, of course, I didn't mention it here, but don't neglect your Hydra area bonuses. I know Live Arena can be a pain to do, but doing these bonuses, and by the way, the order for these I would be looking at, I think Ignore Defense is very nice. Obviously, this is more for late game. I'd say Speed is your main one. Speed, Accuracy, Resistance are really good. Ignore Defense and Crit Damage when you've got a strong team and you're looking to do more damage, they're very good, but Speed, Resistance, and Accuracy are your key for your team surviving and doing well. And then it's pretty cheap, honestly, to grab a few levels of HP and Defense as well, just to stay alive a little bit more. You can see for me on my account, I've invested mostly into just the damage because I'm not having any trouble staying alive because, well, I mean, been playing this game for too long. But guys, there you go. Let me know if you have any other tips, if there's anything I missed, any questions. And yeah, there you go. Hopefully this is helpful to get you building good, solid, full auto teams for Hydra and figuring out the priorities. Again, the full article will be linked in the description, so you've got more of a quick reference to go to. And I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.